Growing up as a person of color in a low-income family had direct psychological impacts I was aware of, but I wasn't aware of the long-term physiological effects. I had no idea that my experiences as a kid could change the way my body functioned for the rest of my life. The social and economic disparities I faced as a child and young adult caused adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. Kaiser Permanente introduced the term ACEs in 1997, defining the term as categories of negative experiences that occur before the age of 18. This incorporates anything from observing or experiencing any form of abuse, neglect, trauma, and a multitude of other experiences that many children face. Now, as a child studies major and EMS provider, I've begun to understand both the long-term psychological and physiological effects of ACEs. And no matter how much a person that may be experiencing ACEs or may overcome their circumstances and be labeled a success story, the emotions and experiences that they go through will persist throughout their life. One systematic issue that causes ACEs is food insecurity. Growing up with little money, my family couldn't prioritize food. I was one of the 20% of food insecure children that are denied food stamps every year. Growing up, I remember eating a constant cycle of Chinese takeout, pizza, and McDonald's. Not eating nutritional food impacted my mood, focus at school, and even my self-confidence. In third grade, I first realized the severity of my diet as I noticed an increase in my weight. My pediatrician had told me I'd become borderline obese. All the years of food insecurity finally caught up to me, which had a negative effect on my self-esteem. I finished elementary and middle school before Michelle Obama's school lunch program, so I ate the same greasy food at school that I ate at home. I remember at school, I'd hear other kids talk about what they had for dinner the other night, and I felt alone in my cycle of fast food. But little did I know that 1 in 6 children, that's 13 million children in America, eat a similar diet. Not only did my poor diet lead to weight gain, but the constant stress made my eating habits even worse. This wasn't a coincidence. The National Institute of Health reports that stress impacts food intake, specifically noting an increased consumption of empty-calorie foods, such as fast food and snacks. Childhood obesity can also contribute to lifelong anxiety, depression, and problems with self-esteem. Even now as an adult, I can see the long-term effects my anxiety and poor diet have. My frequent stomach pain due to distress is a constant reminder of the continuous effects of ACEs. Along with my poor diet, my environment was also a major contributor to my stress. Unlike most children that are told to put down the video games, go play outside, I was told to stay inside, as my parents were worried about exposing me to the criminal activity of the area. But as a curious kid, I'd spend most days peering out my window, trying to make sense of the conversations and laughter I heard from the streets. It was a different story at night. You can imagine how growing up in a neighborhood where sirens fill the air every night can take a toll on one's mental health. When I started getting tired, the chaos of the outside made it difficult to get a peaceful night's sleep. Upon reflection, I can now make sense of the stress and underlying anxiousness I felt as a kid. The worry that I had of the nighttime as a kid has carried over to my life as an adult, as now one of my biggest fears is the unknown of the darkness. I attribute this anxiety to the constant stress of my environment. Psychologists refer to this as toxic stress, which occurs when a person is exposed to or in a situation or experience that is extremely taxing on both their physical and mental health. Due to the intensity of the experience, our body is unable to cope with the conflict. Psychologists Peter Generos and Tor Wager found that there are regions in our brain that change our cardiac autonomic activity and cardiovascular activity due to constant exposure to stress. The heart works harder, leading to increased blood pressure and heart rate, further stressing the body. This increases our risk of hypertension, heart attacks, and possibly premature death by heart disease later in life. Physiological changes to one's health don't only stem from changes in one's physical well-being, though. After moving to a new school in a rural area, I was one of 50 people of color in a school of 550 students. I felt as if I didn't belong and had to change who I was to fit in. I went to my teachers for help, expecting them to provide me with support, but was repeatedly told, things will work out. Not only did these teachers lack the mentorship and guidance that I needed as a child, they also made my academic career harder by contributing to racism and discrimination. One year, my teacher called me Carlos instead of Jose in front of the entire class. And for the rest of the year, my classmates nicknamed me Carlos. This came at a pivotal age in my life as I was forming my identity, as I was in the midst of the identity versus role confusion crisis in Erik Erikson's stages of development. Even now, as a young adult, I still struggle with my mental health and the way I view myself as a result of the experiences I had as a child. My school failed me and others by not being equipped with the proper resources to handle a diverse student body, nor address any mental health issues. Students need someone that will push them to keep trying, that will support them. Now, as a young adult, I'm able to be that person through Jumpstart, an organization at Tufts. Jumpstart is a nonprofit organization that helps lessen the education gap formed in preschool between low-income children and wealthier children as they move on to kindergarten. I spent 2 days a week going into preschools in underserved communities to be a mentor and friendly face to a class full of kids. At Jumpstart, we saw the effects of ACEs in full swing, and our mission was to intervene before ACEs further affected the lives of these children. We recognize and embrace their lives at home in order to help them move forward developmentally at school. I began to work with and form a relationship with a 6-year-old, Drew, who was developmentally and socially behind his peers due to the lack of stability and resources in his home life. He swung between periods of affection and aggression and also struggled to write his name. Through my experience through Jumpstart, I learned and saw firsthand the flaws in the education system and the developmental needs of children that are struggling with toxic stress, as well as how we can aid them. Students need mentors within the school system that go beyond just teachers. Everyday citizens like you and me can volunteer to be mentors for these kids. As mentors, we can offer reassurance, guidance, and advice. It's especially important that people of color show up to be mentors for these kids. In fact, Danielle Atkins, a professor in health management, found that having someone of the same cultural background increases education expectations and school connectiveness, which leads to greater success in school. As mentors, we can teach students what we learned from our mistakes, how to handle stress from academics, and what resources are available to them when they may be struggling. We can't control the circumstances in which we're born into, but as adults, we can control the way students deal with these circumstances and support them. Show up. It does matter. Children spend 11,855 hours in school from kindergarten to graduation. If this isn't a supportive environment, then we are harming countless future generations. To me, Drew exemplified how mentorship can positively impact children who face ACEs. Drew was fascinated by the power of scissors and their ability to cut paper. He didn't quite know how to hold them, but his excitement was definitely a starting point. With progress and time, we taught Drew how to cut straight lines, then shapes. Learning this fine motor skill translated over to the paper, and by the end of the year, Drew was writing his name and more. I saw myself in Drew. He was in dire need of just one person believing in him. And although intervention is crucial, the effects of ACEs don't just magically disappear. Physiological changes to one's body due to ACEs will remain throughout their life. But the support that mentors can provide can at least help lessen the burden of dealing with these effects alone. I never imagined I could be that mentor or giving a TEDx talk about my experiences now. But don't be quick to write me off as some success story and move on. My story, along with Drew's and countless other children, prove that there is so much more to these success stories. And the way they change starts with us. Thank you.